My brother stood in that hospital hallway with his arms crossed, telling the nurse our mama didn't want visitors. She was unconscious in the bed behind him. He had her debit card in his wallet. I know because I found the receipt later. ATM withdrawal, $200, 47 minutes after the ambulance brought her in. That's the kind of man he became. The kind who sees a crisis and sees an opportunity. What he didn't know was that I'd already been to the bank. I'd already talked to the elder law attorney. And I'd already made copies of everything. My name is Renata Caldwell. I work in billing administration. I'm telling this story because I know someone is living a version of it. And I want you to know how it ends when you don't quit.
If you're watching this video, tell me where you're from or what time it is for you. I was at my desk eating a sad little container of leftover rice when his name came up on my phone. Marcus never called during work hours, not ever. I picked up and he was already in the middle of it. Voice cracked, words tumbling over each other. His wife Keisha had filed for divorce. She got the house in Concord. She got primary custody of their 2 kids, Deshawn and little Amara. He had 30 days to vacate and basically nothing to show for 11 years of marriage. "I don't have anywhere to go, Nada," he said. "I don't have anything." I didn't think twice. I told him to move into Mama's house. Our mother, Celestine Caldwell, was 72 years old, retired postal clerk, widowed 3 years prior when our father Jerome passed from kidney failure. She lived alone in the same brick ranch house in Grover, North Carolina, where Marcus and I grew up. The one with the magnolia tree in the front yard and the back porch where Daddy used to smoke his one allowed cigar on Saturday evenings. She'd been rattling around in that house by herself since he died, and I had been worrying about it every single day. When I called Mama that night and told her Marcus needed a place to land, she said yes before I finished the sentence. "Send him home," she said. "This house has too much quiet in it." I wired Marcus $800 the next morning, moving expenses, groceries, first month of whatever he needed. He texted back, "You always come through, Nada. I won't forget this." He forgot it pretty fast. The first 6 weeks were fine. Better than fine, honestly. Miss Odette, our next-door neighbor since 1980-something, called me the second week of April to say Marcus had power-washed the driveway and was cooking dinner every night. She said Celestine looked more like herself than she had in years. I felt that settle into me like something I'd been holding finally put down. Mama sounded good on our Sunday calls. She told me Marcus had rearranged the den furniture, which she initially hated and then decided she loved. She told me he fixed the loose step on the back porch that Daddy had been meaning to fix for about 4 years before he got sick. She said the house had life in it again. I slept better those weeks. I really did. I should have known that when something feels too neat, it usually is. The call that changed my thinking happened on a Sunday evening in late April. I dialed Mama at 7, same as always. She picked up, but she sounded off. Not sick, not sad, just somewhere else. Short answers. One-word responses where she would normally give me a whole story. I asked about her knee, which had been bothering her. She said fine. I asked if she'd made it to Dr. Rutledge that week. She said Marcus took her. I asked what she'd been reading. She said she couldn't remember. Then I heard Marcus's voice in the background, low, and Mama said she had to go. Said goodnight before I could get another word in. My mother has never once in my life ended a phone call without asking about my health. Not one time. She asks about my sleep. She asks about my knee. I tore my ACL in college, and it still gives me trouble in cold weather. She asks if I'm eating right, and she means it in a real way, not a passive way. Saying goodbye to Celestine Caldwell takes 10 minutes minimum. It always has. That call took 4 minutes. I put my phone down and looked at the wall for a while. Then I told myself she was probably just tired. People get tired. I moved on. That was a mistake. But it wasn't my last chance. In May, I called Mama on a Wednesday evening and got 3 tones and a recording telling me the number was no longer in service. I called again. Same thing. I tried her cell. Disconnected too. I sat very still for about 30 seconds. Then I called Marcus. "Oh yeah," he said, totally relaxed. "Mama switched carriers. Better plan. I kept meaning to send you the new number." He rattled off 10 digits. Sounded slightly annoyed that I'd made it a thing. I tried the new number. Voicemail. I left a message. I called the next day. Voicemail. I called the day after that. Voicemail. I sent texts. I got back a few replies, short, a little formal, that didn't quite sound like how Mama writes. She uses full sentences. She uses exclamation points. She types out the whole word because, and she's 72 years old, so that means something. The following Saturday, I drove 4 hours south to Grover. I pulled into the driveway at 2:15. The magnolia was blooming. The new step on the back porch was solid under my foot when I walked up. Marcus answered the door before I knocked. Not Mama. Marcus. He was smiling, but not the real kind. He told me Mama was out with a friend from church, Mrs. Patterson. Went for a drive, should be back soon, come on in. You want some sweet tea? I said sure, and walked to the window. Mama's Buick was in the carport. Both doors closed. Neither one of them had gone anywhere. I called Mrs. Patterson from the driveway while Marcus watched me through the screen door. Mrs. Patterson had been home all day. She hadn't seen Celestine in 2 weeks. I stood on that driveway for a long moment. Marcus came out and said maybe he got the name wrong. Maybe it was someone else from church. Could have been the deacon's wife. He couldn't keep track of all her friends. I stayed for 45 minutes. Mama never appeared. On the drive home, somewhere around the Gastonia exit, I started to understand what I was actually dealing with. I just wasn't ready to say it out loud yet. That night, just after 11, a text came through from Mama's new number. It said, "Baby, I need some time to myself. Please don't come by for a while. Don't take it personal." I read it 3 times. My mother has never in her life said, "Don't take it personal." Not to me, not to anyone I ever heard. When she wants to soften something, she says, "Don't take it to heart, sweetheart." She has said that phrase to me since I was small. It's hers. She owns it. Whoever sent that text did not know that. I took a screenshot. I put it in a folder I'd started on my phone, which up until that point had just held the notes from my 2 unanswered calls and the address of Mama's new carrier. I labeled the folder Mama, and I kept adding to it. It would have 43 items in it by the time I walked into that courtroom. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in the dark and thought about the fact that my brother was sending texts from my mother's phone, pretending to be her, to keep me away from her. I thought about what that meant, what it required, how long someone has to be planning something to do it that smoothly. And I thought about Mama in that brick house, in her chair by the window, thinking I'd gone quiet on purpose. I did not cry, I just decided. Here's something you need to understand before this story goes further. Marcus and I grew up in the same house, with the same parents, in the same small town. And we grew up in completely different families. Marcus was the athlete, 6'1" by the time he was 16. Starting point guard, 2 years all-conference. The kind of kid whose name got announced at pep rallies while the whole gym cheered. Daddy used to drive 45 minutes each way to his away games and sit in the front row. He has a picture on his phone from one of those games. Daddy grinning like he won something. Marcus mid-layup, the gym lights catching them both just right. That picture was on his phone until the day Daddy died. I was the other one. I made the honor roll every semester. I got a partial academic scholarship to UNC Charlotte. I graduated in 3.5 years while working 20 hours a week. When Daddy got diagnosed with kidney failure 8 years ago, I was the one who rearranged my schedule to drive him to dialysis twice a week, every week for 2 years. He'd sleep in the passenger seat on the way home, and I'd drive with one hand and eat a granola bar with the other, and that was just Tuesday. When Daddy passed, I handled the estate. I found out there was $12,000 in medical debt the insurance didn't cover. I paid it out of my savings over 14 months. I didn't tell anyone. Not Mama, not Marcus. I just did it because someone had to, and that someone was always going to be me. At the repast after the funeral, Daddy's older sister Audrey put her hand on Marcus's arm and said, loud enough for the table to hear, that she was so glad he'd been there for Jerome in his final years. He flew in for the diagnosis meeting, the surgery, and the last weekend. That was 3 trips. I was there for 212 dialysis appointments, but Audrey didn't know about those because nobody announced them. I smiled and passed the potato salad. That's the family system Marcus was counting on when he moved into Mama's house. He knew how it worked. He'd been working it his whole life. What he didn't know was that I'd been watching it that whole time, too, and I was done participating. Since the month after Daddy passed, I had been depositing $400 into Mama's checking account on the first of every month. Medication copays, fresh produce, the little expenses that her pension and Social Security didn't quite stretch to cover. She always mentioned it, every single month without fail. Got your deposit, baby, you don't have to do that. I'd say, yes, I do, and she'd argue with me for 2 minutes and then thank me properly, and that was our routine. After Marcus moved in, she stopped mentioning it. I asked Marcus about it once. He said she appreciated it. She just kept forgetting to say it. He laughed a little when he said it, like it was a minor thing, like the kind of thing you laugh about. My mother remembered every birthday in the extended family, including the cousins she saw once a decade. She sent cards. She wrote dates in a little book she kept in the kitchen drawer. She did not forget things, but I kept sending the deposits. The transfers went through every month. I checked. What I didn't check, what I had no reason to check because she was my mother and not my client, was the rest of her accounts. She had a savings account she and Daddy had built up over 40 years. The bulk of it came from Daddy's life insurance payout and a small inheritance from his mother, somewhere in the neighborhood of $340,000. I didn't have access to that account. I had never needed it. I knew the money was there. I knew Mama was careful with it. I knew she kept it for emergencies and for the day she might need in-home care or a different living situation. I also knew that account had a debit card attached to it, and Marcus knew right where Mama kept her cards. The deposits were landing. I kept telling myself that was enough. It wasn't enough. In July, my cousin Brianna texted me out of nowhere. She said Marcus had started some kind of landscaping business and was using Mama's address for the registration. She'd seen something on Facebook, a business page, Cedar Ridge Lawn and Landscape, the address in Grover. She thought I should know. I spent $280 on a consultation with a small business attorney in Charlotte. We pulled the LLC registration, the business filings, the tax documents. Everything came back clean. The business was real, small, barely active, but legal. Nothing in the paperwork pointed to fraud. Nothing was in Celestine's name. The attorney said there was nothing to act on and billed me for his time. I drove home that evening and sat in my parking garage for a while. I had spent 2 weeks and most of my focus chasing a real-looking problem that turned out to be a dead end. And while I'd been doing that, whatever was actually happening with Mama's accounts had kept right on happening. I opened my phone and called Miss Odette. Sometimes the answer isn't in the paperwork. Sometimes it's in the neighbor who's been watching the driveway every morning for 40 years. Odette Simmons has lived next door to the Caldwell house since before I was born. She and Mama have been friends the way women become friends when they raise their children on the same block. Quietly, deeply, for decades. She is 70 years old, and she does not trust easily, and she was cautious with me when I called. We talked about the weather first, then the garden. Then she went quiet for a moment, and I waited. "Your Mama doesn't come out to the porch anymore," she said finally. "Used to sit out there every morning with her coffee. Every morning, rain or shine, since Jerome passed. I haven't seen her out there in, 3 months maybe." I kept my voice even. I asked if she'd spoken to her. "Once," Odette said. "Marcus was out somewhere. She came to the fence. She looked, Renata, she didn't look right. She said she hadn't talked to you in a while. She said she thought maybe you were upset with her about something." I had to put the phone against my collarbone for a second. She thought I was upset with her, I said. That's what she said. I asked if she'd go back to being my eyes over there. I told her I didn't need her to confront anyone. Just call me if she saw something. She said she would, and she meant it. She'd already been meaning to call me for weeks, she said. She just wasn't sure it was her place. I told her it absolutely was. After I hung up, I sat with what I now knew. My mother, in her own home, had been told I stopped caring. She'd spent months believing that. She'd stood at the fence and told her oldest friend she thought she'd done something wrong. Marcus hadn't just blocked me from Mama. He'd convinced Mama that the silence was my choice. That was not a misunderstanding. That was not a side effect. That was the plan. I opened my laptop and started looking up elder law attorneys in the Raleigh area. The call came at 6:42 in the morning on a Thursday in September. I was asleep. The number was a hospital in Gaston County. I answered before I was fully awake. Celestine Caldwell had suffered a stroke the night before. She'd been on the kitchen floor for several hours before Marcus called emergency services. She was stable. She was in the ICU. I was in my car in 11 minutes. I drove that 4 hours in just under 3. I don't recommend it, but I also wouldn't take it back. When I got to the hospital, Marcus was in the hallway outside the ICU, standing with his arms folded like he was guarding a door. He greeted me like I was an inconvenience he'd been expecting, said Mama was resting, said the doctors had everything under control, said I should probably wait in the family lounge. I asked the nurse at the station about visiting. She pulled up the records and looked at me carefully. "Are you a family member?" I said I was her daughter. She said there was only one family contact listed, and it wasn't me. Marcus had changed the emergency contact. At some point in the past 16 months, he had gone into whatever form Mama had on file with her doctor or the hospital system and replaced my name with his. I was not in the records. I did not exist as next of kin. I looked at my brother. He looked back at me with an expression I can only describe as prepared, like he'd thought about this moment. "Mama needs to rest, Nada," he said. "This isn't the time." I turned back to the nurse and said very quietly that I would be speaking with hospital administration within the hour and that my brother was under investigation for financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult. I asked her to please note that in the record. Then I sat down in a chair directly across from the ICU door, and I did not leave. Volvos? About an hour in, Marcus went to get food. While he was gone, a different nurse, younger, with braids, she didn't say her name, came to me and said I could go in for 10 minutes. I went in. Mama was smaller in that bed than I had ever seen her. Left side of her face pulled down, monitors tracking everything, her right hand on top of the blanket. I pulled the chair close and took that hand and held it. She opened her eyes and looked at me, and I could see her working, trying to form something. I told her to take her time. I told her I was right there. I told her I wasn't going anywhere. It took a few minutes. She said, "Marcus told me you stopped caring." I did not fall apart. I am telling you, I did not fall apart in that room. I held her hand tighter, and I told her I had called her every week for 16 months. I told her I had driven to Grover in the rain and stood on the driveway. I told her I had been sending $400 every first of the month since Daddy died. I told her the phone number she had was a number Marcus gave me, and none of those calls had ever reached her. She looked at me for a long time. "I thought I did something," she said. "You didn't do anything, Mama. You didn't do one thing wrong." She closed her eyes. I stayed until the 10 minutes were up. I was in the elevator on the way back down when I remembered Marcus's jacket on the chair. He draped it over the arm when he sat down that morning. I'd watched him grab his wallet from it before he left for food. I had glanced at it without meaning to. I went back to the hallway, to that chair. The jacket was still there. He'd only taken his wallet. I don't want to tell you exactly what I was thinking when I reached into that jacket pocket. I'll just tell you what I found. A crumpled receipt, folded once. The hospital branch, ATM. The one in the lobby past the gift shop. $200, time-stamped 9:47 the prior evening. The ambulance had been called at 9:16. He stopped at the ATM on the way to call for help. He withdrew $200 from my mother's account while she was on the kitchen floor, and then he called 911. I took a picture of that receipt with my phone. Then I put it back in the jacket pocket exactly the way I found it, folded the same way, same pocket. Then I went to the parking garage and sat in my car for 22 minutes. I didn't cry. I'm not even sure what I felt. It was something past crying, something cold and very, very clear. I called the elder law attorney I'd been researching. It was 7:15 in the morning. I left a voicemail and she called me back before 9. Her name was Diane Okafor. 2 days after the stroke, with Mama stable and in a step-down room, I drove to the branch of her bank in Grover. I had a temporary emergency power of attorney document that Diane had prepared and had notarized the evening before. Expedited, because the situation was urgent. It wasn't a full guardianship, not yet, but it was enough to request a records review as next of kin with documented legal standing. The branch manager was a man named Russell Cahill. He was in his late 50s, close-cropped gray hair, reading glasses on a cord around his neck. When I handed him the paperwork and explained who I was, he looked at me for a moment over those glasses, and then he got up and closed his office door. "I've been waiting for someone to come in," he said. He had noticed the pattern about 5 months in, unusually frequent withdrawals from the savings account. Sometimes multiple in a single week, always under $2,000, always at the branch ATM or the machine over on Route 274. He'd flagged the account internally. He had spoken to his compliance officer. But he could not contact Celestine's family without authorization, and Celestine, when she came in occasionally with Marcus, said everything was fine. He pulled the records and set them in front of me. 261 withdrawals over 16 months. The account had held $340,000. That number came from the combination of Daddy's life insurance payout, a $22,000 inheritance from his mother, and 40 years of careful saving. $340,000. The account now held $6,800 and some change. I looked at that number for a long time. Russell gave me a box of tissues. I didn't use them right away, but I appreciated that he put them there. Diane, when I called her from the parking lot, was not surprised by any of it. "This is almost exactly the pattern I see in these cases," she said. "Small enough amounts to avoid automatic alerts, frequent enough to move significant money quickly." He knew what he was doing, or he figured it out fast. She told me we were going to file for emergency guardianship. She told me not to confront Marcus yet. She told me to let her do her job. "Do you trust me?" she asked. I said yes. "Good. Then stop talking to your brother about anything that matters." Diane Okafor had been practicing elder law in North Carolina for 19 years. She was in her mid-50s, ran her firm out of a clean, quiet office in Raleigh, and she had the particular kind of calm that comes from having seen terrible things done to good people over and over and still showing up every morning. She had seen this exact case, she told me, at least 40 times. A parent aging alone, a child moving in under the cover of helpfulness, isolation built slowly, a phone number here, a missed visit there, until the parent didn't know what was real anymore. Then the accounts, always the accounts. "The goal isn't the money," she told me in our second meeting. "The money is just the mechanism. The goal is control. Your brother wanted to be the only person your mother needed. The money made sure of it." I thought about Marcus at 18, the center of every room. I thought about him at 42 with nothing. No house, no kids full-time, no marriage, no identity that still worked. I thought about him driving south to Grover and finding a 72-year-old woman alone in a house full of someone else's memories. And I thought about how easy it must have felt to become necessary to her. I understood it. That didn't make it something I could live with. Diane filed for emergency guardianship of the person and estate. She requested a fraud hold on the savings account through the bank's compliance team. Russell Cahill made that call himself that same afternoon. She documented the financial exploitation and submitted a formal referral to the DA's office. And she told me to be patient because Marcus was about to feel the ground shift and he was going to look for a way to stop it. She was right. He called me 10 days after the stroke. I was in Mama's hospital room, sitting with her while she did her speech therapy exercises, when my phone buzzed on the table. I stepped into the hall. Marcus's voice was warm, concerned, almost gentle. He asked how I was holding up. He said this whole thing had been so hard on the family. He said he'd been thinking about Mama's long-term care situation, that maybe he and I should sit down and figure out a real plan, that he didn't want us to be at odds during something like this. He talked for a while. I let him. I said, "I appreciate that, Marcus. I'll be in touch." Then I hung up and texted Diane. He called. Friendly. Wants to discuss Mama's care plan. Diane replied in about 4 minutes. Expected. Don't engage on substance. He's trying to see what you know. Then she sent, "How much time do we need?" I forwarded it back to her and waited. She replied, "Enough." I went back into Mama's room. She was practicing saying the word Tuesday. Her therapist had her doing days of the week. She could get to Wednesday before she lost the thread. She looked up when I came in and said, "Tuesday," very clearly, and looked so pleased with herself that I sat down and said it back to her, and we did the whole week together, and she got all the way to Sunday before she had to stop. Marcus could have whatever plan he was putting together. I had a different one. 12 days after Diane filed for guardianship, she called me at work. There was a competing petition. Our father's older sister, Aunt Audrey, the same woman who'd praised Marcus at the repast, had filed her own claim for guardianship of Celestine. She was citing concern about the quality of care. She was citing family unity. The filing had Marcus's fingerprints all over it. Same attorney, similar language, submitted within 48 hours of ours. The hearing was pushed back 3 weeks. I sat in my office with the door closed for about 10 minutes after that call. I could feel the shape of what Marcus had done. He'd gotten to Audrey, probably called her, probably told her I was trying to cut him off from Mama, probably used every ounce of the family mythology that had always worked in his favor. The prodigal son, the devoted brother, the one who gave up everything to be there. Audrey had always believed in that version of Marcus. She helped write it. During those 3 weeks, Marcus attempted 2 withdrawals from the savings account. Russell Cahill's fraud hold stopped both of them. The money didn't move. But I didn't know about the attempts until after the hearing. Diane told me later, once it was over, because she hadn't wanted to spike my blood pressure before I had to sit in front of a judge. What I did know was that I was now $8,600 into legal fees. I had burned through 2 weeks of vacation time. I was splitting my hours between Charlotte and Grover, sleeping in Mama's house on the nights I stayed, eating whatever the hospital cafeteria had available. I had not slept more than 5 hours in a row in 6 weeks. I kept the folder on my phone. I kept adding to it. I kept going. The guardianship hearing was on a Tuesday morning in October in a courtroom in Gaston County. Marcus came in with an attorney and a press shirt and the expression of a man who believed his charm had never truly failed him. Aunt Audrey sat beside him. She didn't look at me when I came in. Marcus's attorney presented his case first. Marcus had been Celestine's primary caretaker for over a year. He had managed her medical appointments, her household, her daily needs. Renata lived 4 hours away. Renata had been largely absent. Renata was now attempting to use a legal mechanism to seize control of their mother's life during a medical crisis. He was good. I'll give him that. He was organized and he was confident, and if you didn't know what was in the folder, you might have found it believable. Diane went second. She presented the withdrawal records. 261 transactions, $333,000 removed from the account over 16 months, broken down by frequency, by amount, by pattern. She presented Russell Cahill's compliance documentation. She presented the phone records, the original number disconnected, the new number registered in Marcus's name, the text messages sent from that number in language inconsistent with Celestine's established communication patterns. She presented Miss Odette's written statement, notarized, describing the isolation, the missing morning coffee on the porch, the conversation at the fence where Celestine said she thought her daughter had stopped calling. She presented the ATM receipt, $200, 9:47 p.m., the hospital branch. 31 minutes after the 911 call log showed Marcus had contacted emergency services. The judge looked at the receipt for a long moment. Then she looked at Marcus. Marcus's attorney asked to approach. There was some conferring. Marcus leaned over and said something to his attorney in a low voice. His attorney listened and then made a face that attorneys make when they've just been told something that doesn't help them. Emergency guardianship was granted to me. A protective order was issued restricting Marcus from Celestine's finances and limiting his access to supervised visits only. The competing petition from Aunt Audrey was denied. Diane shook my hand outside the courtroom and said, "Well done," and I said I hadn't done anything. That was all her. "You built the file," she said. "You kept everything. That's not nothing. A lot of people fall apart before they get here." I thought about the 43 items in the folder on my phone. "I almost did," I said, "but you didn't." He didn't disappear quietly. I want to be honest about that because the version where the villain just accepts it and goes away isn't real, and this story is real. Marcus called our cousin Darnell that same afternoon. He called our mother's younger sister, Aunt Phyllis. He called 2 people from their old church. The message was consistent. Renata had gone to court and taken their mother away from him. He'd given up everything to be there for Celestine. He'd been her caretaker for a year and a half, and now his own sister had used lawyers to push him out. He wasn't lying about all of it. He'd been physically present. He had cooked dinners and driven to appointments. None of that was invented. What he left out was what he'd been doing with her money and her phone while he was doing all of that. Darnell stopped texting me back. One of Mama's cousins sent me a message asking what was really going on, implying I owed Marcus more consideration than I was giving him. I did not get into it with any of them individually. I sent one group message to the extended family. No subject line, no preamble, just facts. Celestine Caldwell is under my legal guardianship as of October 14th. I am her guardian of person and estate by court order. A fraud referral has been submitted to the DA's office regarding the withdrawal of $333,000 from her savings account between April of 22 and September of 23. Court records are public. Marcus may visit Mama through scheduled supervised sessions only. Anyone who facilitates unsupervised contact with Marcus will be reported for violation of the protective order. Then I put my phone on the counter and went to check on Mama. I'm not going to tell you everyone came around immediately. They didn't. Darnell stayed quiet for almost 2 months. Aunt Audrey called me once and said she hadn't known, that Marcus had told her a very different story. I told her I believed her. I told her she could come see Mama on Sundays if she wanted to show me something other than words. She came the next Sunday. She's been coming every week since. That's how you sort people out. You give them a concrete thing to do, and then you watch whether they do it. Celestine came out of the step-down unit in late October. She went into a short-term rehab facility for 6 weeks. Physical therapy, speech therapy, occupational therapy. She worked hard. She is a woman who has worked hard at everything her entire life, and a stroke was not going to change that. By mid-November, her speech had improved enough that she could carry on a real conversation, as long as we didn't push it too long. She tired easily, but she was herself. Her eyes were sharp. Her opinions were present. She told the rehab nurse one morning that the oatmeal was thin and flavorless, and that someone should be ashamed of themselves. I drove down on a Saturday in mid-November to have the conversation I had been preparing for. I didn't tell her everything at once. That wasn't what she needed. I told her the parts that directly concerned her understanding of the past year and a half. I told her I had called her every week. I told her every number Marcus gave me had been managed by him, and the voicemails had never reached her. I told her about the texts sent from her phone, not by her. I told her I had driven to the house in May, and Marcus had told me she was out with a friend when her car was right there in the carport. I told her about the savings account. She was quiet for a long time. She looked at her hands. Then she looked at the window. The rehab facility had a small garden outside, mostly bare in November, but there was a bird feeder someone had put up and a cardinal was working it. "How much?" she asked. I told her. She closed her eyes. "All of it," she said. It wasn't a question. "Almost all of it, Mama." She was quiet again. I waited. "I kept wondering," she said finally, "why you stopped calling." Her voice was slower than it used to be, but the words were clear. "I thought I did something. I kept going back over things in my mind, trying to figure out what I did." I took her hand. "You didn't do anything," I said. "You didn't do one single thing wrong." "I should have." "No," I said. "You trusted your son. That is not a mistake. What he did with that trust is on him, not you." She was quiet again for a long time. The cardinal flew off. Another one came. "Is he going to jail?" she asked. I told her I didn't know yet. I told her the DA had the case. I told her there were options and we didn't have to decide anything right now. She nodded slowly. Then she said, "I want to go home." "I know, Mama, soon. I want to sit on the porch. We'll get the porch ready." The DA's office took the case seriously. Financial exploitation of an elder adult in North Carolina carries real consequences. It's a felony when the amount exceeds $100,000, and the amount here was 3 times that. Marcus's attorney reached out to Diane in December. They were interested in a resolution before the case went further. Diane sat across from me in her office on a cold Thursday afternoon and laid out the options. A criminal prosecution was possible, she said. The evidence was strong. But prosecutions take time, take resources, and the outcomes are not guaranteed. A conviction was realistic but not certain. If he was convicted and sentenced, the restitution would be court-ordered. But collecting it, especially if he had limited assets, was a separate process and could take years. The offer on the table was $60,000 over 5 years, a civil judgment rather than a criminal conviction. He would be required to complete a financial exploitation diversion program and submit to annual financial monitoring for 10 years. I looked at the ceiling for a moment. $60,000 out of $333,000, less than 20 cents on the dollar. "Is this what justice looks like?" I asked. Diane considered that. "It's what accountability looks like in this particular situation," she said. "Justice is the part where your mother is home and he's not." I thought about Mama in the rehab facility asking if she was going home. I thought about what it would mean for her to sit in a courtroom, to hear testimony, to watch her son get sentenced, to carry that. I signed the agreement, not because it was enough. It wasn't enough. $333,000 is not $60,000, and no payment plan makes that true. But Celestine Caldwell was 72 years old, and she had already lost too much of what mattered, and I was not going to make her carry a criminal trial on top of a stroke. Some kinds of justice don't look like what you imagined. Sometimes they look like your mother not being in a courtroom. Sometimes that has to be enough. The first supervised visit was in February. Marcus came on a Saturday afternoon, 3 months after the hearing. I was there. That was required by the protective order. A guardian or court-appointed supervisor present for any contact. I sat in the kitchen while they were in the living room, close enough to hear, not close enough to be in it. He sat across from Mama in the recliner, and I heard him start to cry within about 4 minutes. That deep, hitching kind of crying that men do when they've run out of other options. I heard him say he was sorry. I heard him say he didn't know what happened to him. I heard him say he'd been so lost, after everything fell apart with Keisha, after the kids, after... He couldn't finish the sentence. Mama said, "I know, baby." She said it quiet. She said it the way she'd been saying things to him his entire life. I stood at the kitchen counter with my hand around a mug of coffee that had gone cold. I want to be honest about what I felt in that moment, because the easy thing would be to tell you I felt righteous, vindicated, like I'd won something clean. Mostly, I felt tired. Tired in a way that had been building for 22 months, and that wouldn't go away just because a judge had signed a piece of paper. I felt something for my brother that I didn't want to feel, which was grief. Not for what he'd done, for what he'd become, for what must have already been broken in him before he ever drove south to Grover. That doesn't excuse it. I want to be clear about that. Understanding why someone chooses the wrong door is not the same as opening it back up for them. He thanked Mama at the end. He looked toward the kitchen when he left, and I met his eyes for a moment, and he nodded. I didn't nod back. I walked him to the door. That was enough. The following Sunday, I sat at Mama's kitchen table and wrote an email to the extended Caldwell family. Mama was napping in the back. Miss Odette had been by earlier and left a tin of her tea cakes on the counter. I wrote it 3 times before I sent it. The final version was direct, no anger in the language, no performance, just information, stated clearly. Dear family, Mama is home and recovering. I am her legal guardian of person and estate effective October 14th by court order of Gaston County. All questions about her health, care, or finances should be directed to me. Marcus is currently under a court-supervised protective order and may visit Mama only through scheduled sessions as approved by the court. Anyone who facilitates unsupervised contact will be reported for violation of the order. I will not be relitigating the past in individual conversations. The court records are public and available. What Mama needs from this family now is presence, not debate. If you want to show up for her, show up on Sundays. The door is open. Aunt Audrey called 40 minutes later. She said she was sorry. She said she should have called me months ago, that something hadn't felt right to her. But Marcus had seemed so sure of himself, and she hadn't wanted to start something. I told her I understood. She asked what she could do. "Come on Sundays," I said. "Mama would love to see you." She needs people around her who aren't complicated. I'll be there this week. She was. I made one more call that day. The last one I would make to Marcus for a long while. I told him he had the right to his supervised visits, and I wasn't going to block that. I told him every restitution payment needed to come in on time, every month, or I would be back in front of that judge before he could blink. I told him he was never to speak to Mama about me unless I was in the room. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Do you hate me, Nada?" I thought about it. I gave it a real moment. I thought about the tire swing in the backyard we used to fight over. I thought about him driving me to the emergency room when I tore my ACL in college, because he was the only one who could get there fast enough. I thought about the way Mama had looked in that hospital bed. I thought about the ATM receipt, folded once, 9:47 p.m. "No," I said, "I don't hate you, but I don't trust you. And that's not something I did to you. That's something you did to yourself." I hung up. I put the phone on the table and looked out the window at the magnolia tree. It was bare in February, just branches. But it would bloom again in the spring. It always did. The line between forgiveness and safety is one I'm done pretending isn't there. I know where it is now, and it holds. It's a Sunday in late April. The magnolia is in full bloom. The porch step Marcus fixed is still solid. Miss Odette's wind chimes are going in the breeze out front. Aunt Audrey's car is parked on the street. She's been here every Sunday since February, same as she said. I'm in the kitchen making soup. It's Mama's recipe, the one she taught me when I was 11 years old. Chicken, bone broth, carrots, celery, a bay leaf, more black pepper than any printed recipe would ever tell you to use. Mama always said the secret was time, low and slow, Let it work. She is in Daddy's recliner by the window with her walker beside her. Left side still a little slow, but she does her exercises every morning without being told. Her speech therapist, a young woman named Corinne, who drives out from Gastonia twice a week, says Mama is ahead of where she expected at this point. I believe it. Celestine Caldwell has never done anything halfway in her life. Mama's bank account has a little over $5,000 in it today, a long, long way from $340,000, but it belongs to her. The statements come to 2 addresses, hers and mine. There is an automatic alert for any withdrawal over $150. Russell Cahill reviewed the setup personally. No one will redirect her mail again. Renata, Mama calls from the living room. Yes, ma'am. That soup smells like it needs more pepper. From the living room, Aunt Audrey laughs. I add more pepper. I stir the pot. I look out the window above the sink at the magnolia and the porch swing and the street where we grew up, and I think about the 43 items in the folder on my phone. I think about Diane Okafor's handshake outside the courtroom. I think about Russell Cahill putting that box of tissues on the desk without making it a thing. I think about Miss Odette at the fence, not sure if it was her place, deciding it was. You build the truth out of what you can actually hold in your hands. Phone records, bank statements, a crumpled receipt, a neighbor's written statement, a 72-year-old woman saying, I thought I did something when she hadn't done a single thing. You build it piece by piece and you don't let anyone tell you there's nothing there, and you find the right people to help you carry it, and you don't quit. Mama hums something from the living room. I don't know the song. I listen for a moment and then I recognize it. It's a hymn she used to hum when she was cooking, the same one she was always humming in this kitchen when I was small, when Daddy was alive, when this house was full in the way it is trying to become full again. The soup simmers. The magnolia holds its blooms. She's home. She knows I never left. For now, that's everything. That's my story. If you made it to the end, thank you. And I mean that. If this reminded you of someone, check on them today. Don't wait until you're sitting in a hospital parking garage at 7 in the morning, wondering how you missed it. Ask the uncomfortable questions. Call the neighbor. Call the bank if you have to. The conversation that feels too awkward is almost always easier than what happens when you don't have it. I lost 22 months with my mother. 22 months she spent believing I'd walked away from her. I will carry that, but I won't lose another day. If you want to tell me something, what you would say to Marcus or what you've been through yourself, leave it in the comments. Your story matters too. And if you want more stories like this one, check the description. I'll see you in the next one. If this story resonated with you, leave a like and consider subscribing. You can also drop any comment below, even just one word. Maybe tell me where you're watching from, or what time it is right now. Sometimes one word is enough to say you were here.